Final Fantasy VII was the first game that a lot of us remember having those really stunning pre-rendered cinematic cutscenes where you're sitting in front of your TV in 1997 and you're like, this is the future. It can't possibly get better than this. This is just so stunningly beautiful. We were still on, the PlayStation 1. We were still playing Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, and those sorts of games. And then along comes this JRPG out of nowhere. It's massive and it's bold. There's also this moment that everyone remembers where this character who you love dies. And of course you think, well, she's going to come back. I mean, this is a totally fantastical world where anything can happen. But she doesn't. She doesn't come back. She is dead. And I think that was the first moment for me in 1997 where I realized that video games could be more than what they were, that they could actually tell stories that were heartbreaking, that they could actually make a person cry. And that was, for all its other various great qualities, Final Fantasy VII was the first game to make me cry.
Our next game, number 14, was a true industry changer.
You could say it opened up a valve of creativity for FPS.
Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine.
My goodness, Gordon Freeman. Hey, Gordon!
Gordon, stay put!
I'm all but certain it was Gordon Freeman.
Half-Life 2 is just one of my favourite games of all time, man.
Half-Life 2 was amazing.
Isn't it? The game that got me back into PC gaming.
Arriving at a train station, being processed, like, you feel like you're part of a real universe rather than superhero dude with a gun who never gets shot. That's what makes Half-Life feel special. You are every man kind of thing, and it's got real serious human emotion stuff going on.
Dr. Freeman, I presume.
To a backdrop of cool sci-fi and violence, yeah.
I remember there was one of those early scenes and you kind of walk up to one of the prison doors and you peer through the little visor into the prison room and a guard turns around and just slams it shut. But those little subtle differences are what elevates, good developers and great developers. What separates them is those little things which aren't there just for everybody. They're there for those people who just happen to be in that moment.
The right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world.
They treat every chapter like it's a different game in a way. It starts as a typical shooter, and then you kind of get this gravity gun, and it turns into this sort of physics puzzly game. And then you're on an airboat, and then you're on a car, and then later on you're sort of the king of the crabs, and you have those huge antlion crab monsters that you just like throw pheromones and they just go and do your bidding.
The gravity gun.
Oh, so good.
The Citadel.
The Citadel.
The guy who's just beyond your reach all the time with a briefcase.
Dog the Bounty Hunter.
What? Dog the Bounty Hunter, wasn't it?
He is. He's a huge robot.
Is he?
Oh, he's just called Dog.
It introduces physics as gameplay, which was really its big selling point, where in the past, items in video game worlds couldn't really be interacted with in any sort of meaningful, realistic way. I remember when Half-Life 2 came out, I was telling my dad, like, this game has physics. There's buoyancy in it. I was so excited about the fact that I could have buoyancy in a video game. It was, like, mind-blowing.
The storyline behind it, the way the characters were developed, and the world that was developed. A great science fiction world. And I fell in love with Alex Vance.
I found him wandering around outside. Bit of a troublemaker, isn't he?
And she was my ideal woman throughout my 20s.
She's the ideal woman.
Yeah, well. Whenever Gordon Freeman was dying, she'd come along and help him out.
I don't even know, it was immersion even a word then? I don't know, but that game, that summed it up. It was a linear game that didn't feel linear. The level design was just so beautifully constructed that you just kind of always felt like you were making these spontaneous decisions in the flight of the moment, but you weren't. You're doing exactly what they expected you to do.
This is where I get off.
The name James Bond is synonymous with charm, sophistication, and action, but in the gaming world it was more closely linked with obscurity. That was until a small British developer by the name of Rare came along.
GoldenEye is, a legendary, groundbreaking first-person shooter, and it's perhaps the only computer game based on a film that is better than the film. I mean, apart from the bit where Xenia Onatopp crushes someone's head with her thighs.
There was real storytelling attached to it. If you'd seen the movie, you sort of knew the story, but it actually integrated that. This wasn't Doom. This was a really nice rendition of a story you kind of knew.
I found out that some of the designers of the game were first-time programmers for computer games, and so what they lacked in experience, they had with ambition, and they tried all these new ideas out.
And Rare definitely were ambitious. Elements such as stealth, reactive AI, non-linear objectives, and extensive weapons and cheat catalogues were all incredibly innovative and unique for a first-person shooter at the time. But it was the multiplayer where GoldenEye shone the brightest.
I mean, at the time, kind of LANs and online multiplayer just, was still just too hard to really make happen. So, I mean, GoldenEye was that multiplayer shooter experience.
For PC gamers, they had their Doom and they had their Deathmatch. For people who were primarily console gamers, GoldenEye was like a goddamn revolution.
GoldenEye multiplayer, playing it with my brothers. One brother went into a room and just filled it with proximity mines, just had like a tiny room.
Right.
And then he found my brother, and then he held him up at gunpoint and made him walk into the room.
That's amazing. We played an old chops match. We just chop, chop, chop. The hand-to-hand stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. You ever tried karate chopping a person? They don't go down, but in GoldenEye, somehow.
Yes, who could forget the infamous slappers only option? But the real magic of GoldenEye's multiplayer was in the act of screen sharing with your nearest and dearest on one couch in the same room.
What impresses me is how much joy that game provided per square inch of screen. So these days you're playing sort of Titanfall or Call of Duty or whatever on a 50-inch TV, TV the size of like a child's mattress. In '98 or whenever it was, we were playing GoldenEye. Not only were you playing it on a screen like less than a quarter of the size of the screens we have now, but you were playing on a quarter of that quarter in 4-player split screen.
The amount of fun you could have sitting that close to a TV for your corner of the screen was amazing.
Back in 1997, GoldenEye was a work of art, and still the best film-to-game adaptation of all time. Yeah! I said no odd job!
Well, when I heard this next game was coming in at number 12, I did a small poo in my pants.
The gaming transition from comics to consoles has rarely been smooth, and while the incredible Batman Arkham Asylum seemed to have come from nowhere, it was Arkham City that truly delivered the Batman experience we'd been waiting for.
Thanks to legendary Batman scribe Paul Dini, we got to experience a Dark Knight saga on par with the best Batman stories. But more than that, Arkham City achieved something that no comic book or film ever could.
When I played that game, I felt like I'm Batman, and it's rare that a game designer or developer can make me feel like I'm some other character.
Everyone wants to be Batman, The only people who don't want to be Batman are either dead or they're already Batman.
Of course you do! Who wouldn't? But the real hero of the game was the city itself. Leaping from a rooftop with your cape spread, you were engulfed by this morbid metropolis. The jagged skyline, the abandoned streets, the gothic architecture. This was Gotham finally done right. Dark, gritty, and spectacular.
The Bat's here! It's not just one of the best games of all time, it's probably one of the best works of man-made awesomeness ever.
Ooh, aren't you scary?
You're about to find out.
Arkham City. When I think about it, Hex, I feel all warm and fuzzy inside.
Don't you mean dark and brooding, Barger? On to number 11 in our top 100, and it's a second bite of the cherry for BioWare.
The Reapers are still out there.
And it's up to us to stop them.
Mass Effect 2 started with a bang and never slowed down, setting the scene for a far darker, more mysterious adventure that sent us to all corners of this sprawling sci-fi universe.
We all had our old kind of feelings of what an RPG could be, but I never thought of that as being a really fun combat experience. And it kind of delivered that, and it kind of delivered this Hollywood-style sci-fi universe that you could really sink your teeth into.
I just got way out of hand with Mass Effect 2 in trying to like mine every rock in the universe, you know, so I'm sure I could have finished that game probably 100 hours earlier if I didn't feel like I just had to go and scan every little place in the entire galaxy.
Although the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, it was the cast and their relationships that many of us will remember most intensely.
We've lost good people. We may lose more.
The moment when I knew that Mass Effect 2, and indeed the Mass Effect series as a whole, was so brilliant and so special was during a love scene where my character was getting it on with the character that I had been romancing. And I thought it was like I thought it was gonna be really funny. So I got my partner in. I was like, come on, let's look at this scene. It's gonna be so funny. Like, you know, it's really sincere. And as soon as it started, I was like, no, you have to leave the room. You have to leave the room. You have to get out. Because it was suddenly really personal to me. I was like, wow, this game is something special in terms of the way that it developed its characters and your relationships with those characters. And of course, then in the background, there's this giant, you know, like high stakes space opera going on as well, where you have to save the world. It's an incredible juggling act.
I got to the end of it and all my guys survived, and I thought I was this legend, you know, because everyone I'm talking to, they lost all these people and I didn't, you know, and then I find out that you can get laid. I didn't know that. I had to go back through it and sort that out.
All right, Hex, we're down to the top 10. I think that calls for a dramatic pause.
We'll be back after this break.